Good morning, everybody. Welcome to. You cannot hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Yes. So if everybody does not have headphones, please find headphones. I think there's a couple of people in the audience that need them still. But first of all, thank you for joining on a Saturday morning. On this, we're going to try and address a very broad and very important topic in the next 45 minutes. The idea is to have a really good conversation with our panelists here, but then also spend some time at the end to answer questions from the audience. The workshops conversation that we have today is part of a series. Microsoft, the Swedish government, particularly Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and ITU, as well as GFCE, have been driving on effectively the question on how you mainstream the question of the topic of cybersecurity into the development conversations. How do you ensure that when development investments happen in emerging economies, the cybersecurity is an essential part of digital transformation and not just an afterthought. And how do you bridge the gaps between the two communities? So there's a fair amount of work already ongoing on cybersecurity capacity building, driven by the cybersecurity community, but often disconnected from the work being done in development. With that short introduction, I'm going to turn to the panel and get us right started. I'm introducing the panelists quickly. I'm going to start with Giacomo and move over. We're joined by Giacomo Persipaoli, Head of Security and Technology at Unidir, Mariana González Carillo, the Technical Advisor at the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, and Mokhtar Yadali, who's the Special Envoy for the Global Conference on Cybersecurity Capacity Building. And with that, maybe I turn to Mokhtar first to start us off. So how do we bridge the gap? How do we start the conversations between the cybersecurity and development communities, and what should we focus on?
Can you hear me? Yes. First of all, thank you very much for being here and talking about this so important subject. Digital transformation is something that is unavoidable. And digital transformation without cybersecurity cannot happen at all. Hence, it is very important to have cybersecurity as one of the primary concern or objective of the government. If the government has not taken into consideration the cybersecurity for digital transformation, no investment, no development could happen. Safe transactions are the sine qua non condition for for the digital transformation, and specifically for transforming our life in this new digital era. One of the concern that always we have is people have the tendency to separate cybersecurity from the other actions from the government. Government is responsible for the entire security. It's just a broader concept. I don't understand sometimes why some government focus on protecting borders, getting army, police and everything, but start forgetting about cybersecurity, which is actually now part of everything. Government is responsible for putting in place the enabling environment for cybersecurity in general. One, the strategies has to be put in place by the government. Legislative part of it, regulations and policy has to be taken care of. And specifically, multi-stakeholder approach at the national level, at the international level. Cooperation is extremely important for funding institutions, for partners who wanted to protect themselves. Because, mind you, in the matter of cybersecurity, we are one family. Our global performance is measured by our weakest links. So if somebody is actually weak in a certain area, it will affect all the other people. So it doesn't matter if you are very strong and other people are weak. You all have to be strong in the matter of cybersecurity. This is how we'll start off our discussion.
I think this is very helpful. I think also focusing on driving understanding within the countries on the importance of cybersecurity. Mariana, building on that, from your experience, what are some of the measures that we could sort of think about implementing, both at the implementing national levels and then also to drive greater awareness at the donor international community?
I think it's very interesting, the approach that Mokhtar just mentioned, and I would just build up on that. And I think that one of the main core things that is crucial in this aspect is to sensitize policymakers. Sometimes decision makers end up in a place where they need to learn about the topic and that they are not necessarily experts about. So this knowledge, this very technical knowledge, is very far away and it's very distant to what they are specialists in. So contextualizing what does this mean to their own turf and to their own context, I think it's something that could be very helpful to drive the conversation and drive more attention in the international development sphere. And also something that I consider that it's necessary, which is like the second point, is us as development practitioners could be to act as facilitators, because what happens sometimes is that there is different roles within one government. So you have one ministry that's in charge of cybersecurity, you have one ministry that's in charge of digital transformation, and another ministry that's in charge of development. And of course, like with multiple actors, coordination becomes more complex. And we as practitioners, what we can do is to have like this role of enabling interministerial dialogue and to actually make evident what are the intersections and the overlaps between development and cybersecurity, especially what Mokhtar was saying, you know, like there cannot be a sustainable digital transformation without a very proper cybersecurity in place. And yeah, I think that's what I would do, you know, like advise what are the risks and opportunities around the topic and promote the sensitization of policymakers.
Thank you. And I think turning to Giacomo, some of the things that came, I think, from the conversations here have been so far very, I think for me, it almost seems that everybody's like, cybersecurity is very technical, and so we don't understand it, so we don't want to touch it. And I think you guys at UNIDIR do a lot of work to try and demystify some of these conversations to governments around the world, more in the disarmament context, but very similar, but equally important context, where, you know, whether it's cyber, whether it's emerging technologies such as AI. So what are some of your experience and some of the work that you are doing in this space?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Kaya, for the question. I think I want to start by kind of going back to September this year, when the UN Deputy Secretary General at the opening of the Sustainable Development Goals Digital Day said, quote, "Used responsibly, digital technologies can be catalysts of economic, social, and societal transformation." And for me, the key there is in that clause of used responsibly. What does that mean? You know, so being a representative from the research community, I always like to look at data and evidence first. And I think it's key that to help all stakeholders, particularly the development community, understand why cybersecurity is important as a component of responsible use. It's interesting to start with numbers, right? So now, calculating the opportunity cost of not doing something is not always easy, because there isn't a lot of data, but there is some data nevertheless. And a recent report by the Economic Commission for Africa highlighted how Africa's low level of preparedness in cybersecurity is costing member states on average 10% of their GDP. That's the number that the development community understands. There is also another number that says on aggregate, the cost of cybercrime on the continent is about $4 billion a year. Now, that's another number that the development community understands very well, because think about all the good that you could do with that money if it wasn't a cost line of not implementing cybersecurity. So if we go back to the work that we do, it's really trying to unpack for states what does it mean to be a responsible user of this technology. And this can be captured fundamentally in two different dimensions, and then happy later on to dig in deeper in any of these. But responsible use or responsible behavior has two elements. One is between states, and we know that there is a framework of responsible state behavior that states have agreed on that is made of several different elements, including a set of norms of responsible state behavior that is intended to guide the way in which states use this technology in their relations with each other. But there is also a national level to responsible use, which I think is key. And for me, there is responsible adoption and use, I think, of these technologies that everyone today acknowledges being so critical for digital transformation cannot really happen without the development and implementation of a cyber resilience framework. Now, there are so many different definitions and very fancy visuals that tell you what cyber resilience looks like, but trying to, maybe at the risk of oversimplifying the way in which I explain it to myself, what cyber resilience is fundamentally plan to succeed, but be prepared to fail. And then put everything that you need in place to make sure that even if you have everything in place, but if something goes, and it will happen inevitably, defenses at some point will fail you, then what do you do then? So how do you build your resilience there? So I stop for now, but happy to dig deeper.
I think this is super helpful. I think in particularly the angles around how you communicate why the importance of cybersecurity and how do you communicate the cost was very interesting to unpack. I think maybe if we go back to you, Mokhtar, you were in this role as well in the region. So how would you internally go about communicating to your other colleagues, for instance, in government, that this is an important issue?
It's a very good question, and I just want to a little bit jump on what Paul has said with regard to the cost of doing nothing. It's extremely important to have that, and I really appreciate those numbers given by the UNECA. But also, I would like to tell you that in the other side, the cybersecurity market today is trillions of dollars, and the race, the development, the number increase every year by 12%. So there is a market there for those from private sector who are interested on matters related to cybersecurity. Now, coming back to your question in terms of communication, it's extremely important to start by educating the leadership. Because if the leadership doesn't understand cybersecurity or perceive it as another cost center with something that are very complicated, will not go anywhere. What we need is to communicate all the matters of cybersecurity in a very simple manner, accessible manners. In IT, we say that simple is good, simple is understandable, simple is manageable. We need to go out from those fancy kind of extremely complicated concept and transpose them into something that the leadership could understand specifically in terms of metrics for the development. How it will impact the growth, how that will impact education, how it will impact health, how this impacts voting, your critical infrastructure, which is actually the voting system, how this will impact the people who will appreciate you as a leadership. And then from that moment, you will get the adherence and the compliance of the leadership. And once you get that, I believe you have reached a very good stage. Then fight that syndrome of working in silo in every department. Health department do have their sort of digital transformation. The education department have their also some sort of digital transformation, and they have their SOC also. The banking system do have their SOCs. The military have their SOCs. The Ministry of Interior have their CERT and CERT, and there is no coordination at the national level. Some people say that taboo, what is happening in terms of cybersecurity, people don't like to talk about it. Sometimes it's the shame to say that you have been attacked, specifically one in the financial sector. But we have to get out from that taboo. We have to communicate about breach data, what had happened. And then from that moment, when we decomplex the situation, it's become just simple. Yes, it's a disease, it's there, we know it, we are not scared about it. We have to address it all together in a very strategic and comprehensive, inclusive, and multi-stakeholder approach. That's what I will say.
Thank you. And I think, to your point around breaches as well, I think yesterday there was a couple of sessions where we got senior leaders, I think the one was Albania and one was Montenegro, talked about and also Estonia, talked about their experience about how having a large government breach focused the mind and focused the investments. Also made them understand a little bit more the need to call for help, to bring in experts both from others in the cybersecurity community, the industry, but also others in the other governments and it is now much more of a priority. And for instance, for Estonia, they've made it also a benefit, right? Positioned the government as a leader in cybersecurity. Okay, sorry, the mic was suddenly quiet. Maybe Mariana, going back to you, how can we do that? How can we make what Mokhtar was saying, cybersecurity not be about frameworks and standards and conversations that cybersecurity experts often have and are very difficult for normal humans to understand, and avoid that the only moment that people invest in this area is when a breach happens?
That's a very interesting question, and I think that Mokhtar and Giacomo were very articulate when they were trying to exemplify what I mentioned about contextualizing, the importance of contextualizing to policymakers what this means for them. What does this mean for their day-to-day work? Why is cybersecurity important? And especially, I think that the framing of the issue as that this is not a nice to have, or that it's not a topping of your ice cream, but rather it's like a key component of the digital transformation. It's crucial. I also consider that maybe framing it also, because it's not only around IT standards, it's about human rights. It's about protection of the most vulnerable populations, women, LGBTQI community, children. And I think that when we connect these two aspects of how do they interrelate with each other, I think it becomes more down to earth and easier to understand. Like, what does it mean for someone working in a Ministry of Education to have a proper cybersecurity framework in place? In health, there's no better example about the importance of having a strong cybersecurity framework in health systems, right? It's a very sensitive data that can be, that can do harm. And I think that really focusing on what's the relationship between this and a human rights-based approach of the digital transformation, it's very relevant in the international development sphere. And I think that not only this framing would help, but also not only the risks, but also in terms of opportunities. You mentioned this with the case of Estonia, right? Of course, something happened, and this actually became a huge opportunity to become a leader in the topic. So I think that to have both sides of what could be a risk, but also what are the potentials of really strengthening cybersecurity in each of the aspects that we work, I think it's very important.
Thank you. And Giacomo, you started sort of outlining earlier a little bit the concrete steps that states could take. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on those, and how do we make sure, what are the concrete proposals that we can have in terms of ensuring the governments writ large and sort of across the government structure start making cybersecurity part of their funding commitments, a priority effectively?
I wish there was an easy answer to that question, but
we wouldn't have a conversation.
Exactly. I think the solution starts upstream a little bit. And by that I mean that as a community at the international level, we have to start really, it's going to sound cliche, but breaking the walls or working across silos. I think we're specialists in using semantics to kind of divide the work. And now cybersecurity comes with it's a very loaded term that comes with a very specific connotation. And in the development community, that connotation is not particularly appreciated, so they talk about digital security as if it was something different. Let's start talking about the same, if we were talking about the same thing, let's stop using different words for it, because that then comes with all sorts of implications when it comes to funding, when it comes to eligibility for certain activities to be, or certain organizations to be a recipient of those funding channels. So I think it's important to start, stop. I have like a kind of a stop, start, continue kind of approach. So first thing you have to stop doing is argue on semantics. So let's create a common understanding of what is the problem here. Let's stop hiding behind the finger and say, oh, no, cybersecurity is not my concern. That's kind of what state or the defense apparatus does. So working across, breaking down the silos that exist even within governments, I think is key. But also start updating all of those indicators and metrics that are used to determine what is contributing to development and what is not contributing to development. I think in today's world, the line between security, development, it's so blurred that I think we have to kind of break that kind of virtual and structural cage that we have created around us. And we have to continue investing in bringing all of these communities together. Governments have to, they have to be educated. Skills development, education is key. But that doesn't go there because it's not sufficient, right? There's only so many people you can educate. There is only so much that you can do in terms of skills development. There has to be a sense of ownership by the side of governments that are recipient of these sort of interventions to make sure that the results are sustainable over time. And that's what I think it's the role of UNIDIR, of GFCE, of other organizations, is to really start working with governments and take them through the journey until we are sure that they can, they got it and they got the situation under control and they can continue.
Thank you. Does either of you have things to add in terms of concrete steps? I really like, Mariana, your point earlier around, and sort of, Giacomo, you touched on it as well, about bringing in other aspects such as human rights and making sure that it's not, and cybersecurity is not seen just as a national security issue. So it is a national security issue, but is much broader.
I think that I would just like to elaborate a little bit more on that. And because if we understand and if we try to bring this, as Giacomo was saying, you can only build so many capacity building measures and trainings and e-courses, and you can have like many experts talking about the topic. But if there is not really an actual transparent conversation around the topic between different stakeholders from different sectors and from different communities, I think it's going to be very challenging to actually advance on this. And if we do not acknowledge that it's not only about national or individual security, but we rather connect this to the human rights-based approach and human-centeredness of what development is trying to pursue, I think it could be very challenging to achieve this. And something I think that it's also relevant is the way we communicate this, because I think that sometimes we fail into communicate the vast knowledge that it's already out there. So, I come from the background of data use for policymaking, so I really like the numbers that you provided, because it's like the evidence is there, so you can take actionable decisions when you have the numbers. But how do you bring this down to really the people who have the power and who have the capacities and the mandates to actually do something about it? And I think that something that we are doing right now in terms of like data use and data ethics, data protection, data governance, together with UNDP, is to really try to translate this very distant knowledge closer to policymakers. how do we bring these really so familiar to their own context so that they can actually say, oh, I can identify with that, and actually this is relevant for my work because of this, this, and this. So I think that's a key priority that we need as practitioners to take a very deep thought on that.
Thank you. I think I'd like your point about the policymakers, but I think the point is also about, we need to make change. We need to achieve change in the way of people that control the budgets think, right? And I think you do a fair amount of advocacy of that in your role as a special envoy. So maybe I'll ask you to talk a little bit about how you go about doing that. And in the meantime, I will encourage people in the audience to think about questions, because after Mokhtar speaks, we will turn it over to see if there's questions from the audience.
No, the Global Conference for Cybersecurity. Oh, yeah. Hello. The Global Conference for Cybersecurity Expertise, the first in its kind, and will take place in the end of the month in Ghana, is about really coming together globally, all of us, and talk about how resilient should we be in terms of including cybersecurity in our development. It's the first time the international community, the global community, will be talking about cybersecurity capacity building. There is several conferences on cybersecurity, but this one is specifically dedicated to capacity building. And I'm glad that it's starting with Africa, because humanity started in Africa, and I hope the future will be in Africa. So, and my role there is really to plead for everybody to come and participate to the conference in terms of really contributing, listening, and set up a plan through which we all will coordinate and not waste our resources. Because, as I said at the beginning, in the matter of cybersecurity, we are all in the one basket. Our performance in that sense will be measured by our weakest links. Everybody has to understand this. If somewhere somebody is not good in cybersecurity, then everybody can be affected, because everyone, every country, every computer, every phone can be used as a proxy to attack somebody from wherever it is. Hence, it is very important that we coordinate. We coordinate our capacities, we coordinate our action, and really try to mitigate this race to control the cyberspace. This willingness to hunger to go for the power on cyberspace in order to attack this or attack that. By attacking somebody else, it's like fights in the darkness where everybody is just giving, hitting somebody without knowing who is hitting. Because we say in Africa, if you harm by fire, you will be harmed by fire too. So if you attack somebody, somebody can attack you. And this should be not the game. The game is not about being strong in the field of cybersecurity to do something bad about it. The game is to make sure that we are all transacting safely for the peace and for the stability.
Thank you. I think this was very important. I'm looking if there's hands with questions quickly. Otherwise, I will build on that point. But a quick moment. Yep. Peter.
Thank you very much. So my name is Peter Stevens from the OECD. Thank you very much. It was a fantastic panel and a really great opportunity to hear about the importance of building political will and sharing partnerships and building bridges between communities who historically have not engaged with one another very well. I would just love to hear about any examples that you may have of when you've seen those formats of building those relationships to really work, to really have impact, and to see, is that possible to then scale that as the challenges in cybersecurity continue to evolve and grow? Thank you very much.
Who wants to take that?
I could. Because it's specifically why I'm talking about Ghana. Ghana is one of the examples. It's an African country, but the national governance they have set up, including all partners, police, military, intelligence, sectorial sectors, all of them together forming a community. This is the cybersecurity start with the national good governance, inclusive good governance. And Ghana is an example. It's a very good example. I think most of the African countries and other countries should learn from that. This is one of the countries that has one of the best kind of cybersecurity authority. So formally and from resource point of view, because one of the things that most of the people don't have tendency to do is not to allocate resources to cybersecurity. Cybersecurity need to be budgeted as you budget education or you budget, health also. Those principles need to be embedded in our national budget structure. And Ghana has done that, and I think this is something could be a very good case study, and specifically when you come to Ghana, you can see that closely.
Thank you. Giacomo, Mariana, do you have examples? Okay, other questions? Yeah, go ahead. If you could also introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, and thanks for this very interesting debate. My name is Giovanni. I work at the European Commission, and I'm involved in the preparation of the Summit of the Future next year at the UN, where there is a chapter on digital, the Global Digital Compact. So I was wondering what you would see as a measure of success coming out of the Summit of the Future, specifically on cybersecurity. Is there something that you would expect coming from that level of decision-making that would help in the area of cybersecurity?
Yeah, go ahead.
Should I go? That's a very good question, because it's my understanding that there's still a lot of uncertainty around what the Summit of the Future is actually going to be able to produce. But I think the one key takeaway, if I had like one wish, would be for states to commit that it's making a distinction between security and development is we're beyond that. So that cybersecurity is part of development. We shouldn't even be worrying about, we shouldn't even asking the question whether or not cybersecurity is relevant for development. I think if we could, in September next year, if all states could agree as a collective that the distinction between security and development is part of a obsolete way of thinking, and while it is important to maintain certain specificities for practitioners, it is, in substance, there is no distinction. I think that would be at the top of my wish list.
Something that would be interesting for me and it's very similar to what Giacomo was mentioning, was that there is an actual recognition that they are not two separate issues, and rather that to really achieve a sustainable digital transformation and sustainable development with a human rights-based approach, it's necessary that we have a proper cyber security framework in place, and that they are not exclusive, but rather that they go hand in hand. So like maybe joining and bringing up together very basic principles of how to integrate cybersecurity in existing frameworks that are already very well accepted in the development community. Not creating something new, but just like really a very simple set of principles that can be integrated in frameworks that are already in place and that are being used by the wider development community. I think that would be a very concrete step, and like something that could be very interesting to see how this plays out.
Quickly, the issue of artificial intelligence, I am sure you will be addressing that one, because that is the major source of cyber attacks. Because if at this point of time we still use human kind of approach for attacks, now we are generating attacks through a very efficient artificial intelligence. So therefore, the future of cybersecurity is linked with the future of AI. Second, the Internet of Things. We have learned recently that two machines start learning language without being told to learn that. So objects around us are capable in the future to act without our control. And I'm not thinking about Terminator, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger was asked the question last year at Las Vegas, and he said, it's not now anymore fiction. So it's not fiction anymore. So I see Itachi as here, and they are building, helping a lot of countries to do some socks, which is actually very important that the future domestic object around us, those who are constructing them, take the same responsibility we do have in the automobile industry. If something is wrong with your object, you need to make sure that the things you are constructing for people are as safe as it should be, and you are responsible for that. And besides that, we need to set really an international framework such as something like similar to Geneva Convention in terms of cybersecurity, because if this is not regulated, specifically with the generative AI, we would find ourselves really out of control. We cannot control anything. So that is the conference of the future. You need to think about all of that. The framework, the enabling environment, and the shared responsibility from all actors that are there. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel, Brent?
Hi, Brett Solomon from Access Now. I just, coming back to this question about security and development, I think we need to be very careful with that equation, because for many, I think, in the human rights and development community, the idea about security raises the question of security for whom? And so cybersecurity, in a way, in some instances, in many actually, can be the enemy of rights-based development. And I think we need to be clear when we come back to your point about terms. Digital security is something which the development community and human rights community see about security of the individual and of the community. When we talk about cybersecurity, as you indicated, it's much more about states and about national security. And I want to make sure that when I'm fully supportive of a human rights-based digital security-informed development, but that's very different from a cybersecurity approach to development, which can be about protection of the state, national security, to the exclusion of development actors.
I think that's a very fair point.
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, I think that's a very fair point. I think maybe Mariana, you want to go first?
No, I think that, I mean, I agree with you on the terms of how can we pursue and how can we position actually a human rights-based digital security. I agree on that. I think it's not a debate with an easy answer, and I think maybe Giacomo will jump later and develop more around that. And the priority, at least in the development community, should be always, of course, like safeguard human rights and the individuals, right? And I don't know, I would like to hear your thoughts around this topic.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. And there's always the risk of oversimplifying a very complex issue here, which was not my intention. But I think human rights is the foundation. And if you look also at what states have agreed in the context of international cybersecurity, one of the norms is that, they should, in their use of ICTs, they should act, with respect to human rights and the resolutions that are cited, etc. So I think, let me be clear that I'm not suggesting that, state security should be prioritized over security of individuals, because that's not what I was saying. But we have to understand that many of the measures that need to be taken are valid for both. So when we're thinking about some of the, cybersecurity or digital security is not just a technical problem, it's a problem that goes beyond technology. And it's a problem that you cannot wait to have an incident before you're realizing what you're missing. So you need laws that criminalize certain use of technologies. You need to have, if you realize that in order to respond to an incident or to prevent an incident, whether it is to protect the state or to protect individuals, you need to work with the private sector. You need to have laws in place that allow you to do that. You need to have practices in place and procedures in place to do it. So I think when we're looking at cybersecurity or digital security holistically, it's a combination of factors of which technology is only one. And I think that while it is important to not conflate state security, national security with individual security and human rights, I think it is also important to acknowledge that there is a substantial degree of overlap of the measures that should be taken in order to protect both. So starting with that, I think, would be important.
Thank you. And I think that's a really good summary almost. I think I will ask you all to sort of provide a few concluding takeaways in a second. But I think, for us, we've largely in our conversation here focused on effectively governance and resilience and what the state can do to improve security. I think both in terms of what frameworks can they put in place, what laws, what structures. We haven't touched on a lot of issues in that space as well. Mokhtar touched a little bit on the need for restraint almost, right, in terms of states investing in cybersecurity to lift up society, not to use it as a weapon, effectively. Giacomo just now touched a little bit on the importance of prosecution of cybercrime and the frameworks you need for that, but we haven't really unpacked it at all. Mariana talked a fair amount about the importance, of individual security and sort of human rights-based approach there. And I think, again, given that we focus just on the government frameworks, it's almost like a starting point, right? I think throughout the society, we need to think about how nonprofits are cyber secure, how the industry is secure, and so and that's also the other point. I think you mentioned Hitachi. I think is any company. I think how do we work with the private sector to ensure that what they develop are secure products and systems and secure practices. But so I feel we could talk about all of this for another hour, but I wanted to see, so what is your call to action at the end of today? What do you want people in the room to take home with?
The key messages I would like to convey here is, one is cybersecurity, the most important thing that could happen in our days today. So it has to be not only at the technical level, but it has to be really debated and discussed and taken care of at the C level. Number two, enhancing capacities for everybody is extremely important. Number three, we don't need to weaponize cybersecurity. Number four, it has to be cybersecurity and development need to go together. The same approach we are doing for developing other sectors, same approach will be done for cybersecurity, even more and better. And last, I will just paraphrase what has said by one of the founding fathers of the United States, in terms of freedom and liberty. If you restrict liberty on the name of security, you don't deserve neither of them, neither security, neither freedom.
Thank you. Mariana?
Thank you. I think that the first one, and very important for me, would be knowledge dissemination and contextualization of what cybersecurity means for policymaking, and especially for decision makers. The second one would be for me to really frame it in such a way that this knowledge that's very technical, very distant, in such a way that's more easier to grasp and to actually translate into their own contexts. And the third one would be very similar to what Mokhtar was mentioning around capacity building, because there's also not shame in a knowledge that we need more capacity building, that we need more information, that we need maybe different tools. And maybe the last one is the incorporation of these standards in existing frameworks that are already being used in the development landscape, because they are not two separate things. They go together, one another, and hand in hand. So thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Giacomo.
It's hard to follow all of that, but I think I would like to stress that the concepts of security and development are not in competition with each other. They're actually interconnected and mutually reinforcing to some degree, and that cybersecurity and digital security are also not in competition. But if we take respect for human rights as the foundation and the basis on which to build up, you need both. You need cybersecurity, you need digital security, you need to be able to protect individuals, but you also need to be able to protect your critical infrastructure that is delivering, critical services to your people. So I think that it's important to recognize that when it comes to development, both cybersecurity and digital security, there is one security that matters, and I think we should aim to really create more opportunities for this sort of exchanges. These communities have been kept separate, maybe by design or maybe by choice, but I think we need to create more opportunities for us to have these conversations and understand each other, because I think there is sometimes there is the problem that one community doesn't really understand the vocabulary, the problems, what the other one is facing, and I think there is only advantage that can come from talking more to each other. So I hope this is a trigger or an opportunity to start a more structured dialogue on this.
Thank you. With that, we are out of time. Thank you, everybody, for joining again on a Saturday morning. I hope this was useful, and we hope that we continue this conversation in the future.